This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. All the little rectangles on my screen. Let me get the meeting called to order and do a roll call. Nick, could you please do roll call?
Sure can. All right, now just a reminder here, everybody's been muted, so you probably need to unmute yourself to respond to me. We're going to start off Director Engfer.
Present.
Director Leopold. Director McPherson.
Here.
Director Cassidy.
Present.
Director Franklin.
Here.
Director Pollock.
Here.
Director Dills.
Here.
Director Ferris.
Here.
Director Henry. Director Henry, you might be muted there if you're out there.
I'm here.
All right. Director Stiles. Director Stiles. All right. Director Perry.
Here.
Styles here.
Stiles here. Gotcha. All right. Now this is the alternate members. Director Baskin. Director Brown. Director Koopman. All right. Director Hayes. Director Lind. Director Moran. Director Eckwall.
Present.
All right. At this time, if I have not gotten a response from any directors, if you found your mute button or any issues, just let me know now. All right. Hearing none, Director Perry, it looks like we are 10 out of 11.
Okay, excellent. Are there any additions or deletions to the regular agenda as amended?
There's none from staff?
Okay. Okay, hearing none. Any oral communications on matters not on the agenda? That means anybody who is able to speak with us and wants to have some time, generally do 3 minutes for an item that is not on this month's agenda. This is your chance. Nick, would you manage that?
Sure can. Members of the public who are calling in by phone, if anybody's calling and would like to make a public comment, you are live. All right, I hear no public comments at this time coming from those joining us via phone.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. I get approval of the minutes from the June 25th. Thank you, Nick. Can we approve the 25th meeting? Do I hear a motion?
I move approval of the minutes from June 25th. It's Ruth.
I'll second this, Angela.
Okay, Ruth Stiles, motion, second.
Angela
Angela Franklin, seconded. Is there any discussion? Yes, thanks, Angela. Is there any discussion from the board? Okay, any comment from the public listening? If you've read the minutes?
Right, again, here, just give me 1 second. If you are calling in via phone and you have any public comment on item, which is the approval of last month's meeting minutes, you have been unmuted. If you are a member of the public calling in via phone, this is your opportunity to make a public comment. All right, hearing none.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a roll call vote?
Sure can. Director Engfer,
Yes.
Director McPherson,
Aye.
Director Cassidy, Director Franklin.
Yes.
Director Pollock,
Aye.
Director Dillis,
Aye.
Director Ferris,
Aye.
Director Henry,
Yes.
Stiles,
Aye.
Director Perry.
Aye.
All right, we have 10 votes out of 10 directors present.
Okay. All right, item 2.2, term expiration of well owner representatives. This kind of snuck up on us. We probably should have talked about it last meeting. The well owner representatives have a 3-year term as set forth in our founding documents and bylaws. And that is up, I believe, next month. So does staff want to give a little presentation on this?
Before we move into that, because it was an amendment within 72
Oh, right.
hours,
Yes,
we
yes.
do need to get a 2/3 vote from the board to formally add it to the agenda.
Do I need a motion?
Yes, you do need a motion.
So moved, McPherson.
A motion to talk about this month, so we don't have to not take an action next month.
Second.
You still might take action next month, but just to add this 2.2 to the agenda, we need a 2/3 vote, and then we'll see what the outcome of this discussion will be.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, so I have Director McPherson as making the motion, Director Stiles is seconding. I'm going to go ahead and execute the roll call then. Chris, if that's all right.
Yes.
All right. Director Engfer,
Yes.
Director McPherson,
Yes.
Director Cassidy,
I guess, yes. Should I be abstaining because it has directly to do with me?
Not for this action, it's just to agree that the late item was added to the agenda.
Then yes.
Director Franklin,
Yes.
Director Pollock,
Yes.
Director Dills,
Yes.
Director Ferris,
Aye.
Director Henry,
Yes.
Director Stiles,
Aye.
Director Perry.
Aye.
All right, motion passes unanimously.
Okay, well done. All right, so the issue, Perrette, do you want to lay it out, or Terry, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I think we'll hand it over to the legal counsel.
Perfect. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Section 2.2 of our bylaws say that a well owner representative serves for a period of 3 years. And I can't believe that much time has already flown by. Angela Franklin and Eden Cassidy's terms are expiring in August of 2020. So the bylaws give 2 options on how we proceed. One is to initiate an all new appointment procedure by reaching out to the community, drumming up interest, and trying to get new well owner representatives. Or we can authorize the then serving well owner representatives to serve another 3-year term. That requires the unanimous approval of the well owner representatives and board approval. So first, I think we would like input from the well owner representatives, Angela and Eden, whether they're willing and interested in continuing for another 3 years. And once we get an answer to that question, we want feedback from the board, whether we open it up to do further search, or whether we're not going to ask the working committee to start that search process, that appointment procedure process. So I'm going to call on Angela first. Would you be willing to serve another 3 years?
I don't know if I want to hang around you guys for another 3 years. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm good with doing it another 3 years.
Thank you very much. And Eden, are you interested in serving another 3 years?
I am. I have a bunch of changes that we've talked about and sort of danced around for a couple of years now that I think would make it a lot easier for us to be robust participants, actually give our most to this process. But yeah, I'm willing to do another 3 years.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I don't know if this is the right time or not, but we actually spoke with Perrette earlier about putting something on a future agenda. We actually wanted it to be on this one, but we knew the timing was off. So we want to talk about possibly making some changes to the bylaws for the private well owners at a future meeting. So I don't know if now's the time to bring it up because it's related to this, or if we need to talk about it later on in the meeting.
I think we should bring up that in a subsequent meeting. And then maybe we can be a little bit more prepared. We're going to try to keep this narrow as to the sole issue as to whether the board now wants us to go out and do I'll call it kind of like a procurement, or the wording is whether we want to go through the appointment procedure or whether we want to move forward with our existing well owner representatives. So Chris, do you want to take it from here to explore that issue?
Terry, this is Perrette, and just to clarify, we would not be appointing, the board would not be appointing the well owners today. It just aids the staff in preparing next agenda packet to know what direction the board would choose to go.
Yeah, so I think the question is, do we need to go through the process to, in the interest of inclusivity, transparency, open it up to people who maybe didn't know this was going on, or like, what the heck? I think that's one option, or we can look at all the hard work we're in the middle of doing and all the hard work there is to come, and the possibility of breaking new people in might not be fair to them or fair to the hard work that Angela, Eden have done. So I'll open it up. I see we have a
Mr.
comment.
Chair, this is McPherson. I like the idea of having them continue. Has there been anybody else that is well owners that have expressed interest, though? I don't know if they would have had the time to do that at this point, but I like the idea of continuing with what we have with Ms. Franklin and Mr. Cassidy. But has anybody else expressed interest?
It has not
Not to
been
my knowledge.
to the staff, yeah.
If Sierra Ryan is here, she would know more than anywhere. There's Sierra. Do you know?
We haven't heard, I have not heard any requests from other well owners who are interested in this process.
Right. Yeah. So people are smarter than we think then, right?
Okay, anyone have any comments? So I guess the thing to be decided here is whether we start the process of looking for other people, or just agendize next month to appoint Eden and Angela back to the position. Is that correct, Terry?
Yes.
Does anyone just want to chime in if they feel the need to open this up to the general public of well owners? The general see a comment on the chat. That is Ruth. Comment. Go ahead.
I really would like to thank our current well owner representatives for their very dedicated and diligent service, and I would be thrilled if they would continue to serve. I think our community would be well served by their continuance.
Okay, Lois, you have a unmute. There you go.
Yes, I think that things are heating up and it would be rather difficult to bring someone new in if we have two well owners who want to continue. And I know, just having been on this board for about a year and a half, how difficult it is. And it's going to get more challenging, and I'm for continuing with our two well owners.
Okay, so is this a motion and a vote, or is this just, we would have a vote if people wanted to put it out there?
My sense is that perhaps there could be a motion not to do the appointment procedure. And then for the next meeting, we will put on the agenda the appointment of Eden and Angela.
Did you mean not to do the selection procedure?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a motion to forego the selection procedure.
Second.
So moved.
Okay, who was that?
I believe I saw Mr. Dale Pollock and Mr. Bruce McPherson there. Was that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, any more discussion? I don't think so, because we already discussed. Anything?
Chris, could I add something?
Yes.
I would like you to address Angela's request at some point to make sure that staff has direction what to do with the bylaws in the future agendas.
I think Terry said it would be on the meeting.
In the next meeting, or?
Yeah, be on the agenda for the next meeting. Just
Would you like-
to deal with how we deal with it.
So I have a question, because the staff has been trying to combine all of the administrative items once a quarter. So that would be a departure from that if you feel it's important to bring up.
I thought we were
bylaws
going to decide what meeting to do next meeting.
next meeting.
Yeah, well, I thought that we were going to, I mean, I didn't think we could decide which meeting to choose this meeting. At this meeting, we had to choose it next meeting. That's what I heard Terry say, but maybe I misunderstood.
I'm not aware of the proposed changes to the bylaws, so I'm not prepared. But I see a request from Ruth to let us know, Angela, generally what are the topics that you want addressed in the bylaws? And maybe we can get a feel for how that fits into future agendas.
Yeah, so
Well, before we go there, I think what the request from staff is that if we can decide when to do this, something like this would be an administrative item that will be done in the quarterly meeting.
The bylaws will be done in the quarterly meeting, perhaps, but the appointment of Angela and Eden will take place next month.
Correct. Yes. So the question, what I'm asking is, should the staff agendize a discussion about potential changes to bylaws to August meeting, or should we push that out to October, because that is the next quarterly meeting date?
The quarterly meeting is where it would normally go. It'll take up, at least a half hour, 45 minutes of the meeting and add that on. So if we have a meeting that's going to be 3.5 hours long, it'll be that much longer. And now, Angela, if just to not spend too much time on this, can you give Ruth a quick synopsis of what?
Yeah, so basically, like she mentioned, things are heating up and there's going to be a lot more sub meetings or subcommittees going on. And, for Eden and I, who are working full time like everybody else, but also trying to fit this in, it's very difficult for us to sometimes take 3 to 4 hours out of our workday to attend these meetings on a regular basis, these subcommittee meetings. We have Jeff Koopman, who is an alternate and who is, heavily involved in this, just like we are. And we actually proposed that he help us with some of these subcommittee meetings, but because he's an alternate, he wouldn't be able to speak at any of the meetings to give updates to these subcommittee meetings unless he's actually attending the meeting. Example, I'm sick or Eden's sick or something like that. So we would like to be able to modify the bylaws to allow him to be able to speak on these type of events because he is participating in these subcommittees. So that's where we don't necessarily, and plus also we want to address the fact that, these terms, basically, right, what if Eden and I both said, no, we don't want to continue, and now there's going to be a huge gap. So I kind of feel like these terms should overlap, so that way if I said no, then Eden is still at least a member for a while. And then if he says no, then, there's no representation from a private well owner. So I kind of feel like that the terms should be staggered versus we both end at the same time. So that was kind of my thoughts. And I don't know if Eden wanted to add something.
Sure, I'm happy to if Director Perry allows.
I think I would ask let's not turn this into a whole topic tonight.
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the private well owners are the only true volunteers participating here. Everyone else is either elected or doing this as part of an extension of their day job, right? And so, yeah, it's sometimes difficult for us to be involved in those daytime subcommittee meetings, but I think it would also be healthy to have our positions, since they're appointed by the board and we're representing a constituency that's not an actual entity, to be staggered so that Angela's expires 1 year, mine the next, Jeff's the next. And while we're at it, amending the bylaws for that to build in there so that we could rotate once a year and say, hey, I'm going to be the alternate now and Jeff's going to be, so we don't have to play games and pretend we're sick from the next meeting so that Jeff or whoever can speak up to a topic.
Okay. All right. I think we get it. I think staff understands that. I will say that I don't think it would, my personal opinion, it wouldn't be considered a game if one of you saw something that was going to be dealt with and wanted Jeff to attend the meeting instead because he would contribute more. I think that would be, you could do that voluntarily right now, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct on that, staff?
Chris, Doug Enfer has a very good point. I think we're going way too deep into this. It's not agendized. So the only thing that I would like to know is, does the board feel it's urgent enough that we should agendize it for August, or should it wait until the regular quarterly cycle? I think that's where we should kind of lead it today.
Exactly. Can I get my question answered though? Angela, know that it wouldn't be breaking the rules if one of them said, I'm not going to that meeting, Jeff's going to go and handle it.
That's not breaking the rules, yes.
Okay. Just between now, since it's a long time between now and October. I just want to let them know that's okie dokie.
Yeah. So is it October I'm hearing, or is it August? Because it is something that we are, we need to.
The quarterly meeting we do when we do the administrative.
Okay, so October, we'll agendize it for October and try to bring some more thought through agenda report and discussion to the board. Thank you.
Okay, there is no consent agenda. That takes us to our informational session.
We still need a vote. We had a
Yeah.
motion and second.
As of right now, I have a motion on the up in the air here. It was motioned by Pollock and seconded by McPherson to forego the private well owner appointment process for next month. Director Perry, I take a roll call vote.
Yes, yes.
Okie doke. Now, before I do this real quick, for public comment, if you are calling in and you want to make a public comment on item 2.2 of the agenda, you have been unmuted. If you're calling in and a member of the public, the floor is open for public comment on this item. All right, hearing nothing from the phones. All right, going into the vote, Director Engfer,
Yes.
Director McPherson,
Yes.
Director Cassidy,
Yes.
Director Franklin,
Yes.
Director Pollock,
Yes.
Director Dillis,
Yes.
Director Ferris,
Aye.
Director Henry,
Yes.
Director Stiles,
Yes.
Director Perry.
Yes.
All right, we have 10 votes out of 10 directors present. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. So no consent agenda. General information session. I'm going to pass it to our facilitator, Dave, to walk us through item 4.1 and on. Dave. Okay. Kind of frozen. All right, well, we have GSP roadmap. Is everyone, any questions on that?
Well, this is Georgina. Good evening, everyone. I can just point out a few things on the roadmap. I think we have it pulled up there. Can you put it at the slideshow, Nick? So today, I think you've all looked at the agenda. We're working on, hopefully we're going to get to it all, but 3 different sustainability indicators. And this is how it's going to be from now on. We're going to be working on multiple. Before, I tried to keep each meeting kind of, just focusing on one indicator, but I'm sure you've noticed we have had a few meetings with 2 indicators. Today we have 3. Next month we'll have probably 2 plus some other topics, and in September we're going to start talking about the 4th applicable indicator, which is changing groundwater and storage. So that's a completely new one for you. And this pace, Director Henry is correct. It is going to get more difficult because we're going to have a lot of these indicators being talked about in the same meetings, and it can get a little complicated. Some of them are related, and you have to kind of try and separate them from each other when we're talking about it. We're going to start talking next meeting about modeling results and the water budget and climate change scenarios, things like that, which we've heard a bit about already actually in December, so it's been quite a while. But another thing I should point out is that we have about a year until the draft GSP is done. It has to, well, we're hoping to get it out for public comment in July next year. So you probably can tell I'm a little nervous about this. And so we do need to get things done. We can't really prolong and say, oh, we'll do it at the next meeting. Now our timeline is really shrinking, and we really have to focus on making the decisions that will go into the GSP. So on that note, is there another slide there? I think this is it for the roadmap. Yeah.
So this is Dave. Can you all hear me?
Now we can, Dave.
Okay, I apologize. I was having internet connectivity issues, and I was therefore trying to participate via my phone, but apparently my phone was not letting you all hear me. So you can hear me now, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. So Georgina, were you going to continue on this? Anything else on these slides, or were you completed then?
I've completed.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everybody. I will hope that connectivity issues are not going to plague me this evening or plague us. So what I'd like to do right now is I want to sort of frame the presentations that you're going to hear tonight and some overarching items related to outreach and engagement, and therefore some related minor adjustments that you're going to start experiencing in the facilitation approach that we take on things. So before we go into this first presentation by Miller Maxfield, I'll just say you're going to be receiving, and we're going to be participating collectively first in a discussion and an update on the Communications and Engagement Plan, or C&E plan, as you see before you. Then we're going to hear and engage in a conversation about depletions of interconnected surface water and groundwater. That's going to be presented by Chelsea Neal from Balance. And then lastly, a third presentation by Georgina on proposed undesirable results for degraded groundwater quality and significant unreasonableness statements about chronic lowering of groundwater levels. So those are the three items that we're going to go through, and we're aiming to get done in about 2 hours and 10 minutes or so. And we'll look for an appropriate time to maybe take a 10-minute break or so somewhere along the way. But before we dive into the C&E presentation, I want to just cover some things that have been getting discussed at your working group scale, which is staff and consultants. And I think everybody here is clear that we meet on a roughly every other 2 week basis after a board meeting is held, and we start beginning talk about the next meeting. And at the last working group meeting, or actually prior to it, I had raised the question and pointed out that you as board members and we collectively have made, I think, very effective retooling of things to make these virtual meetings as interactive as possible. You all as board members have been significantly more active and engaged collectively rather than just a small handful. We had those conversations several months ago. The thing that I had raised the attention of the working group was that we really had not had in quite some time, other than the public meetings, other than these meetings which are open to the public, any focused public outreach type activities along the lines of what we had done, about a year ago or over a year ago. And so that sparked a conversation between myself and Perrette, and then with the working group, and then subsequently a focused conversation between myself, folks from Miller Maxfield, Perrette, and Nick about ways that we can start expanding and make sure that we are in fact getting the public actively engaged, or more actively engaged. I think everybody here knows that when meetings were being held in person, we had a fairly common set of people that were attending. It wasn't uniform, but it was a fairly common set of folks that would attend. Since we've switched over to the virtual process, while some of those folks may be attending, they don't seem to be attending as much from the public, and we are getting very little feedback from the public. And as you've heard me say before, one of the things that's important, and as a regulatory or a regulation under 354.10 in the regs is that your decision making is to be informed by public input when at all possible. So above and beyond expanding the conversation that we have with you all is still this requirement to the best we can to be getting feedback from the public. So to make a long story short, I put together some ideas. We've talked about them and vetted them out, and I want to very, very quickly run through some things that you're going to experience as additional changes tonight, and then how that's going to transcend into subsequent meetings. You, I think, have all certainly experienced that in the last 4 months or so. There's been a fairly common practice of Georgina and I are working together as a team. Georgina brings forward a technical presentation. It's very much focused towards you as a board. We get to a certain pause point. She hands it to me. I work with you and facilitate conversation amongst you as a board, but it's very board centric. It's focused towards you. The members of the public are here. Yes, we check in with them. Rarely do we get a member of the public commenting, and then we move along. And that's been working actually very, very well. Starting tonight, you're going to experience me doing a bit more of a pause. We may not have a particularly robust number of members of the public tonight, but we're going to be working offline in the manners that I'm going to speak about in a second to be expanding outreach, to really be doing a full court press to get more members of the public virtually attending these meetings as a alternative to trying to do standalone town halls or things like that. Since right now our general feeling is there's a lot of stakeholder fatigue about virtual meetings just because the way we've all been living under COVID for the last several months and will be. So we're going to try to be using these board meetings as a proxy for both the work that you all need to do as a board and trying to engage more members of the public to attend, or to be learning offline and capitalizing on the fact that these meetings are recorded. So what it's going to mean in applied terms is starting this evening, I'm still going to do the same facilitation methods I have been doing with you. I will then sort of pivot towards really pushing as best as I can to try to get members of the public to also be engaging and providing their feedback in this setting, in this format starting tonight. That might mean I might be doing some reframing of things that have been stated technically to get it down to a little more common layperson terms, perhaps. But anyway, slice it, that's going to be part of my goal. And then we'll switch back and to continue on. You know, I'll go back to the technical presenter and that person will present and we'll do that same method back and forth. In addition to that, we're going to be looking to expand outreach activities, and there are items that are in the works right now that Miller Maxfield and Nick Wallace are going to be working on. But in a nutshell, one of the things we're going to be trying to do is, again, capitalizing on the fact that these meetings are recorded. We're going to be, first of all, can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. What we're going to be doing is trying to find a way that these video recorded meetings can be made available with an interactive mode on the agency's website, such that, for an example, and this is a very kind of embryonic idea, a member of the public doesn't need to attend this meeting at the time, but they could go online thereafter, find a recording of this meeting, find a recording of technical presentations that have been edited down further, maybe even build in some quizzes or some interactive fields that a person can watch a portion of a presentation that Georgina might do, for instance, and then there'll be a pause, and then there'll be a questionnaire that pops up and a person can weigh in and give us their feedback, and that would be interactively woven into the website. So again, we're trying to expand the way in which people can interact with us, and we can create a repository of data feedback to you all as a board. I won't go into any more detail other than that, other than to say that how you're going to experience that in the immediate tonight is we're going to be testing something out. As we go through presentations and we sort of hand the baton back and forth between the presenter and me, after I have exhausted all the conversation, I'm going to use something along the lines of the phrase, "This concludes this segment of the presentation," and I'm going to pause. And that's quite literally a built-in pause that we're going to start trying to build in that will then allow Nick to start doing some of the video editing that we're going to be testing out so that we can start seeing whether this is going to work. So it's going to seem weird to you at first because I've never done something like that before, but I just wanted you to know in advance the reason I'm going to be sounding like a little bit of an automaton saying that is because that is what we're looking for, these edit points that Nick can then be toying with, and we're going to see if this interactive nature and use of video is going to work. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions that you have to me or to Miller Maxfield representatives or anybody. Otherwise, then I'm going to hand it over to Miller Maxfield to start the actual informational session. So any questions to me about what I just covered? Okay, hearing none and seeing none. Again, our sequence here is going to be, we're going to start with Miller Maxfield on the C&E plan, then we're going to go on to Chelsea Neal, and then to Georgina. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bill and Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Murray, and I am a senior account manager at Miller Maxfield. I'm here tonight to talk with you about the CNE plan, which is something we've been working on actively throughout our time with SMGWA. Nick's going to help me pop through these slides. I just have 8 quick slides. This will take about 10 minutes. And please feel free to pipe in with questions at any time or at the end. I believe the CNE plan is in the board packet for you tonight, so you were able to review that, and you have it online for members of the public who are watching. Generally speaking, the CNE plan purpose and objective is to assist us with delivering general messaging and strategic communications. Our job is to engage with the public about the development of the GSP. These are things you guys already know, of course, so I'll run through this pretty quickly. This plan is meant to be a guide. It's also a final report out as part of the GSP. So while we call it a plan, it's both a plan and a report. It's a living, breathing document that we are updating throughout this process. It's to provide board members and staff with a guide to ensure we're making consistent messaging about the requirements we're trying to meet. It also establishes a roadmap for GSP development. That graphic you've been seeing at the start of every meeting, that's part of this, a small part. And it's also to identify, and this is the really important part, to identify how and when beneficial users and other stakeholders can provide timely and meaningful input to our overall GSP. Nick, could you go to the next slide, please? So, to start, just with how this works, the CD plan will be in the appendix of the GSP. There's also going to be a small subsection within the GSP that includes a description of the beneficial users and uses of the basin. And then there'll be a communications section that describes all the decision-making processes, public engagement opportunities, how we've encouraged the development, and how the public has been informed. And so this is where the living, breathing aspect of this document comes into play. We know we're still developing ways to engage with the public, especially during COVID and shelter in place, and that those ways are changing almost, on a weekly basis, how we can communicate with people and where we can find people and meet them. So, and right now, of course, most of it is online. So within this document, you will see we've listed off ways where we have connected with folks in the past, basin tours, the workshops, public meetings, and then things that we're working on now and doing in the future. Some of it's ongoing, like using the website, using social media, using an email newsletter, and then some of it is, it fluctuates or is developed as part of the process. When we need something new, we can adapt and create that. And that's one of the really nice things about the CNE plan is you can adapt within the GSP process to continue to find new ways to engage with folks. I think I went a little ahead of my slide. I'm sorry about that. On the next slide, so just for a quick background, I think everyone knows this at this point, why we're doing this, why groundwater is critical to our water supply, and finding ways to better manage it and be sustainable are goals not just for us, but for basins across the state. So the beginning of this plan really dives into that, why we're doing it and how we're doing it, just the overarching structure of the board, the point of the GSP, etc. I won't belabor that because at this point, I think we all know this aspect of it. The purpose of the CNE plan, like I talked about, it's how we are going to deliver those communications to the public and how to engage with them. So it's not just delivering the message to the public, but it's making sure we receive input. To Dave's point just before my presentation about how can we make sure that we're hearing from folks and making it easy for them to provide their input. Let's see. Another important aspect of this is the timeline, that we can't do all this at the very beginning or all at the very end. We want people involved throughout the process, as it is an evolutionary process and there are things to learn, there are decisions to make at multiple steps within this process. So our goal with the CNE plan and the state requirements are that we continue to engage with the community, with those beneficial users and uses within the basin, and that is reflected in this plan. The plan also will include, sorry, I got ahead of myself there. So some of the appendixes will include aspects of outreach. The plan itself is pretty basic, not basic, but it's concise. And then the appendixes are where additional information will live, such as the guiding principles, documentation of all of the ways we have done outreach and collected feedback from the public, from beneficial users and uses. That includes things like board meeting summaries, documentation of the website and social media, email newsletters, which now are going out on a monthly basis with those board summaries and other information about SMGWA as relevant. We also will include a database of stakeholders and beneficial users so that we make sure that we're tracking the folks we are reaching out to. The appendixes will include media coverage ranging from op-eds that we've helped develop to news articles, those earned media moments that are really important. And the basin tour materials will be included in the appendix as well. And this list of what would go in the appendix obviously can grow as we do more outreach and engagement. I feel like we've talked about this already because it's but the point of, okay, sorry, got ahead of myself. Again, the CNE plan supports the goals of educating stakeholders, articulating strategies and channels to obtain ongoing stakeholder input, increase awareness and understanding, and increase engagement. So that's, again, why this is a living, breathing document that will be modified and enhanced as we do more work, and has been already, of course, because we've been doing this for quite some time already. So the next steps with the plan are really just for you to see it today. Thank you for giving us time. And then we would like to put it on the website. This is an important aspect of the plan, to be transparent with the public. So not only are we coming up with ways to engage with the public, we are telling the public how we are engaging with them. And that way, people can, should they choose to, they could let us know better ways to engage with them, or at least they're aware of what's happening so they can find those moments to communicate with SMGWA and provide their input.
We should stop calling it SMGWA. It's terrible.
Sorry, it kind of makes me smile, but I can adjust. I'm sorry. Anyway, that said, that's the quick overview. I'm happy to take questions or go more in depth with anything that people are interested in. Thank you.
Okay, so can folks hear me? Because I'm trying to click my mic on and off, and it's the icon is not changing. So can you all hear me?
Yes.
That is really weird. Okay, graphically, it's just not showing it. All right, so let's go ahead and open up the floor first for the board to ask any questions that they have of Miller Maxfield, after which I will, as I stated earlier, try to see if we can get some members of the public to be actively engaged in this discussion, and then we'll move on. So board members first, anybody wish to get into the queue and ask a question?
This is McPherson. First of all, thank you for the presentation, Jennifer, and the plan of attack. But we've been meeting for 3 years now, and or have been formed now for 3 years. In your description, your op-eds now, are you going to say this is what we've done and this is what we need to do? I mean, how can we summarize? Can you summarize that pretty basic? I mean, people have to know what our basic cause is, and then what we've done and what we need to do still, to give them some kind of a simplified presentation of both of those aspects. I think is going to be, it sounds like that's what you're going to do, but it's going to be a tough call.
Bringing this plan to the board now is what's the right way to phrase this? We've been working on the plan since we started working with this agency, and so this moment and the board reviewing the plan is really just one step in that living, breathing document. We've been doing things, we'll continue to do things. This is just kind of a check-in, so you see what has been happening and what we're going to do moving forward. So as we capture things for the appendix, we'll capture those prior op-eds. I know you've done a great job at including information about the agency in your columns in the press banner, and you know, we hope to see more of those in the future. So this is just kind of a check-in for the board. We're going to keep doing outreach and also continue to document everything that's happened in the past and what's coming in the future. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry that was confusing.
Bruce, this is Dave. Just to weigh in from the standpoint of doing this in other basins, what we are collectively looking to do is basically make this portion of your GSP ultimately kind of a no-brainer for the DWR reviewers when they get it. So one of those is the actual existence of a C&E plan. That unto itself is a check mark. And then, as Jennifer said, a comprehensive repository of all the various outreach activities that this agency has done or any agency has done. So ideally what DWR sees, without having to even really dive deep into the weeds, is that there is this very robust administrative record of numerous things that have been done, so that you look golden by any standard, and certainly by comparison to perhaps other basins, you look even more golden. So it's really both the plan itself and then the repository is summarizing everything that's been done. Let's go to Doug and then Lou and then Ruth in that order. Doug, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Jennifer, with respect to one of the referenced appendices, which is this list of, well, I think you refer to as the community group draft list, but basically I think of it as the database of folks we've engaged with. When and how will the board have an opportunity to take a look at that list to make sure we feel like the bases are being covered?
I think that's something that you should look at more than once in this process. I don't have it for you tonight, but that's something we can bring forward in the near future. I can work with Perrette on that timing.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Lou and then to Ruth after him.
Thank you. Question, what sort of specific success indicators are you considering to guarantee that our feedback works?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think what we want to see is continual ways for the community to engage on multiple platforms. And so that could be something as simple as those op-eds Bruce talked about, Kelly's youth program with educational opportunities, what Dave touched on with a new way we're going to try to broadcast snippets of board meeting or sections of board meetings so that people can engage with those and provide feedback on their own time. So hopefully we get to a point where we're trying to reach out to folks and we're not hearing back from anyone because they've said what they want to say. But I think the database that was just talked about, to make sure that we've reached out to all those people that the board has found important, that we recommend are important, and have given them an opportunity to speak. And we still have some time to do this, so we're optimistic that we can make all those connections and really just annoy people until they're tired of hearing from us.
Jennifer or Bill, do you mind if I weigh in and add an additional perhaps answer additive to the question that Lou just said?
That'd be great. Yes,
Okay.
please.
You know, Lou, there's sort of two silos of outreach that are done here now from this point forward. There's sort of the voluntary outreach that is done by this, you know, by any particular basin because they want to. They sort of voluntarily are doing it, and they sort of believe it as a philosophy to do it. And then there's sort of the regulatory side of things that I sort of alluded to a little bit earlier, which is the places where you kind of check the boxes that you need to then sort of hold up to the reviewers and say, we did this. I mean, it's sort of, to use a legal term, you gave the stakeholders standing, right? And what you want to avoid, whether it's a NEPA CEQA or this or any other type of compliance activities, you want to avoid a circumstance at the end where a stakeholder can come forward and legitimately say, you didn't give me standing. You did not give me an ability in a way to engage. So the robustness of this process has to sort of take two forms. One is the bare minimum that we can then again hold up and say, look, we did this and this and this and this and this, and that allowed us to give reasonably all stakeholders standing to participate should they choose to. This agency and all agencies, you're not going to be gauged on how many people sort of took you up on it, because you can't be responsible for other people's behavior. You're going to be gauged on the ways in which you gave people the opportunity to engage. And that's the regulatory side. The voluntary side is, for instance, the winter workshops a year ago or more than a year ago. Nobody said you had to do those. That was a philosophical decision by this agency because this agency felt it was the right thing to do. And there will be more of those kinds of things. Collectively, it's all going to create a big body of evidence that shows that you did a lot to try to bring people in, but you're going to be gauged on what you did, not how many people engaged. The metrics beyond that are metrics that this agency would set for itself for success.
And to that point, that's why we're working now to document everything, even though we're nowhere near done yet, because we want to make sure that we do have that full body of evidence when we submit the GSP.
Did that get to your questions, Lou?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I appreciate your comments on standing. That's exactly what I was thinking. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. Let's go to Ruth and then to Jack.
I'm concerned that there's one segment of the stakeholder group that's not having their voice coming into our meetings, and that's the non-de minimis pumpers and the very small systems. And they're not being represented if they haven't chosen to be represented. And I hope that there is an extra strong push to tell them what they're doing, who are their nominal representatives, and who they should be talking to get them involved. I'm concerned that in the future, they may be very unhappy to find out what's been done. And I think the best way to make this palatable is to hit them over the head repeatedly to let them know that this is coming and we're doing this. Or
Ruth, I think
all are doing this.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ruth. I think that's a really good point, and that's something that we've talked about with Perrette and figuring out how to partner, hopefully, with the county to really directly connect with those folks. We know who they are, and so we just need to work to reach them, even if that means we need to call each one of them and give them the option to participate.
All right, thank you, Ruth. Jack?
Yes, I'm wondering about, do we envision that when work on this communication plan is complete, and we turn our groundwater sustainability plan into the state, is that the conclusion of this work product that we'd be receiving from Miller Maxfield, or do we envision that we'd have an ongoing assistance with communicating to the public as we might amend and get more input later? Are we envisioning, I get the feeling we're envisioning that this would stop at that point that we complete the plan, but I'm wondering if we've thought about the potential need beyond that.
That's not something we've discussed yet, but I know we do really enjoy working with you all and would be happy to find a way to continue to partner and provide that public outreach.
Thanks.
I mean, I can tell you, Jack, that your outreach won't end with the GSP. It's what you'll be held accountable for as sort of your first major milestone, but you'll obviously have the 5-year updates and the ongoing work as any public agency would to be continuing outreach activities. So, okay. Something just totally changed on my screen here. So are there any other comments that or questions that people would like to make from the board? Okay, so now before we move ahead, I want to now take this opportunity to look to members of the public that may be with us, recognizing that you are not obligated as members of the public to speak to this, but obviously if there was anything that had a unique implication towards the public, it would certainly be the communication and engagement plan, because that is the tool that we're going to use to be engaging with you, and we really want to hear any of your thoughts, but in particular, things that you might have to say as members of the public that you think this agency should be doing to most effectively reach out. So turning our attention towards members of the public that may be attending tonight on the call or on the online, are there members of the public that would like to weigh in at this point in time and give their thoughts and make sure that this board hears you? Again, regulatory speaking, this board's decision making by regulatory language is to be informed by you as the beneficial users and the public. That's one of the really unique aspects of SGMA is that interaction that must take place. So members of the public, Nick, I'm going to look to you to be opening up the floor and unmuting people when you need to, and then we'll see if there's any members of the public that wish to weigh in or ask any questions.
Okie doke, as Dave just suggested there, if you are calling in via telephone and you are a member of the public wishing to make a comment on this matter, now is your time. If you are calling in via telephone, you have been unmuted. All right, I hear nothing from the phones, and if you are a member of the public joining us on the web, I believe this would be your time. I hear no public comment.
Okay, well, thank you to Jennifer and to Bill. This concludes this segment of the presentation.
Thank you all for your time.
We're now going to move on to Chelsea Neal from Balance. So Nick's going to go ahead and change out the screens. And Chelsea, if you can wait just a minute and make sure the screen gets pulled up before you start. So we'll pause.
And Chelsea, I have you unmuted as well.
All right, so Chelsea, go ahead, please.
Good evening, everyone. As Dave said, my name is Chelsea Neal, and I'm with Balance Hydrologics. This evening, we're going to talk about the depletion of internet-connected surface water sustainability management criteria. First, we're going to start off by looking at some of the background information on why we're talking about surface water in the groundwater sustainability plan. And then we'll look at a few different components of elements we need to look at for this indicator, such as identifying groundwater dependent ecosystems, looking at where GDEs could be influenced by pumping, looking at priority species, quantifying stream flow depletion, starting to think about a significant and unreasonable statement, and then our approach to minimum thresholds. So first, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but under SGMA, we're required to identify interconnected surface waters where groundwater dependent ecosystems are, and we need to assess the rate of depletion and evaluate whether that rate of depletion is causing a significant and unreasonable impact. If the conditions are significant and unreasonable, then they can't get worse than they were on January 1st, 2015. We then need to set minimum thresholds and measurable objectives to prevent further significant and unreasonable impacts. And we also need to define undesirable results based on minimum threshold exceedances. So I think we'll pause here, Dave.
Yeah, so this is the first place we want to pause to see if there are any questions that members of the board have, or any comments that members of the public have, given that we are sort of extending into a new realm of discussion regarding GDEs, and we haven't talked about that. And since undesirable results for GDEs, introduces a different type of beneficial user, where in this case, the beneficial user is not a person or an individual, but it's actually the habitat and the species. So we just want to check and see if there's any initial questions that you have about what's shown here on the slide, since it starts opening up a new space of discussion. So let's go to Lou, and then we'll see if there's other comments that folks have. Lou, go ahead, please.
Could you go back one slide, please?
Chelsea, did you hear that? Go back one slide.
Oh, I did. Sorry, I have a delay. Here we go.
There we go.
There we go. I'm interested in that bullet point about identified priority species. When you're talking about GDEs, have you thought, or is there a ranking of the most susceptible to the least susceptible GDEs, and do you gear your strategy to those most susceptible?
Yeah, so, and we're going to go into this further. There's a whole section on priority species, but we definitely do, give higher consideration to species that are threatened throughout the process. Those tend to take a higher priority.
And a follow-up question: is there any reason to believe that some of those higher priority species would be like the canary in the coal mine towards other species?
Yeah, and one of the ways that we look at those priority species is, there's a number of species that need to be evaluated, and some of those species, like the canary, as you're saying, are sort of covered. They have very similar requirements that need to be considered. So often there are select species, but there's other species that have very similar needs that are evaluated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lou. Chris Perry, we'll go to you now.
Yes, just one quick, the next slide, you go back to the second slide now, the one we were on previously. There you go. I do understand the January 1st, 2015 concept of the bar, but it sounds like you're saying that even if we have a condition that is significant and unreasonable, that technically all we have to worry about is the worst we can do is it can't get any worse than January 1st, 2015. That the state would allow us to have a significant and unreasonable situation as long as it's not more significant and more unreasonable than it was January 1st, 2015?
Yes, that's my understanding of the law. Dave, you might be able to fill in more about that.
That is accurate with one caveat, and this is sort of emblematic of why we want to dive thoughtfully into this topic, that it's important to remember that just like on the water quality sustainability indicator, that's not a proxy for the Clean Water Act. Neither is this indicator a proxy for federal or state Endangered Species Act. So while you may look at this and say, we're talking about significant or reasonable conditions any worse than they were in January 2015, again, bear in mind, that's specifically within the context of that surface water, groundwater interconnectedness. When we start talking about species and habitats and things like that, it's important not to conflate that to other statutes and regulations that address species of special concern. It's not a get out of jail free card, so to speak, of conditions that might be impacting critical habitat or species. This is SGMA specific. And so that's where the squishiness comes in particular on this one and the water quality indicator.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's go to Lois. Lois, you may need to unmute. Lois, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay, Dave, you were talking about proxy, and later on in this part of this presentation, it talks about using a proxy for measuring groundwater. Surface water by using groundwater as a measurement. So when you're talking about proxy here, are you just talking about what might be unreasonable or significant? Is that all you're talking about? And how is that? How are those results defined?
Yeah, and so I'm gonna hand that. I think Chelsea's gonna cover that actually when we get further into this presentation. I'll just clarify that when I was using the term proxy, I was very specifically meaning one statute to another statute. Like what the statute in this case is SGMA. It's a statute. It's not a proxy for other statutes. There's a different kind of proxies that are more metric based that Chelsea's going to talk about and is going to, I believe, answer that very question, or hopefully is going to answer that question when we get a little further in the presentation, Lois. So when we get there, I'll make sure we double back to you and make sure that we're answering your question or not, okay?
Okay.
Eden, you've got a question. You've written it, why January 1st, 2015? That's because that is when the legislation as amended went into effect. SGMA first went into effect January 1st, 2014, and then it was amended over that subsequent year. And it's the enactment is as per January 1st, 2015. That's kind of the magic start date, if you will, of SGMA. Did that answer your question? Georgina, go ahead. You got a comment?
Yeah, we've actually mentioned this date before, and it's for all the indicators. It applies to all of them, not just this one. It's been problematic in other GSPs throughout the state using this because it's in the middle of a drought. And so, it's right towards the end of the really bad recent drought. So people don't really like this because conditions were pretty bad then. But this is still in the act because it's when the act was signed in 2014, like Dave says, and it came into effect January 1st, and so they had to do this to kind of grandfather in the what had happened previously. So yeah, that's a little bit more history on that date.
Thank you. Why don't we go ahead and move ahead then, Chelsea, please?
Great, so we can look at the classification of groundwater dependent ecosystems. We've broken this down into 4 different categories. The first is open water, which includes things like lakes and ponds. We have riverine and riparian, which includes things in stream habitat along rivers and riparian corridors. We have springs where groundwater is discharging and can support adjacent wetlands. And then we have this more general other groundwater dependent wetland category, which includes things like quarry floors, specific types of vegetation, seep complexes, and that sort of thing. So just to give you some general information on these different types of GDEs, we can first look at streams. And specifically when we're talking about groundwater dependent ecosystems along streams, we're talking about streams that are gaining. So where the water table is higher than the nearby channel elevation. And so groundwater is flowing into the channel and providing flow to that system. This is considered a groundwater dependent ecosystem here on the left. And on the right, we have what's considered a losing stream, where the groundwater table is lower than the channel, and so we're losing water to the groundwater table. This is often considered an area of recharge. And depending on the depth of the groundwater table, it may or may not be considered a GDE. And then we have situations where the stream is completely disconnected from the water table, and flow is being lost to groundwater. And this complete disconnect here is not considered a GDE. So under SGMA, we are not required to evaluate or consider things that are not GDEs. We're only interested in those where groundwater is supporting the ecosystem. We can also look at some different types of springs and how springs are formed. So springs are where groundwater is discharging to the surface, and we see them in depressions or topographic lows. We find them along faults where water can easily move and travel to the surface. We can also see them at geologic contacts. So for example, the Santa Margarita is quite permeable, and it overlies the Monterey, which is more impermeable. So if this contact is exposed, groundwater seeps out at those locations where there's a change in the permeability between the geologic layers. And then we also see springs along fractures within bedrock where water can move more easily. And then we can also think about those features of open water or other GDEs like quarries. So on the left here, we have what we would consider to be a GDE, which is where you have an isolated wetland or a pond, which is underlain by a permeable layer, say the Santa Margarita. And you can have groundwater that's discharging and supporting that feature. This is considered a GDE. On the left, you could have a similar feature, but that's underlined by a more impermeable layer, say clay. And that water is perched, and there's no real interaction with groundwater that's happening. The water table could be, hundreds of feet below. This would not be considered a GDE. And one thing to consider is there's a number of quarries within this basin, and sometimes what happens in those quarries is the bottom layer has gotten so compacted over time that it becomes an impermeable layer, and those may actually be perched and not considered GDEs. To address this sustainability indicator, this is a general process or flow. It's very similar to what was done in the Mid-County GSP, and I can walk you through those steps, and that'll also be the steps that we're going to talk about this evening. So first, we need to identify the potential GDEs, and then we need to think about where those GDEs are influenced by pumping. Can look at the priority species and habitat, then quantifying stream flow depletion, developing a significant and unreasonable statement and deciding if we're currently experiencing those conditions in the basin, and then setting a minimum threshold and measurable objectives. Now, I should also point out that, this flow chart makes it look as though it's step by step, but many of these things are ongoing currently, and it is still very iterative, similar to how the other indicators have been addressed, where we refine things over time. And I will pause here. Dave?
Yes. So once again, given that you have had experience as a board of getting ourselves to the significant unreasonableness statements, as Georgina has worked with you all on the groundwater quality and groundwater elevation, this is the similar set of steps, albeit it may look a little differently. So we want to open up the floor for any questions that you have about this series of steps, because again, it's introducing a new number of variables that we haven't really talked about previously. Let's go to Ruth. Go ahead, Ruth, please.
I'm wondering about artificially created wetlands. I'm thinking in particular the one above, sort of across the Glenwood from the Scotts Valley High School. If it's artificially created, does it have any special rules under SGMA?
That's a great question. And my understanding, first we need to evaluate whether or not it's actually connected to the groundwater, but I believe that it is regulated under SGMA.
Okay. Thank you.
Ruth, this is Dave, I'll weigh in that as compared to other basins we're working in, that's our experience as well. It's not a matter of how it came to be, it's a matter of is it there and is it dependent on the groundwater? That's really the variable. Because we're seeing that in other places in various formats in other places in the state where landowners or people will come forward and say, well, that didn't used to be there historically. And the answer sort of has been, well, it is now, and it's dependent on the groundwater. Other questions and comments about anything that Chelsea had covered thus far, and of course leading up to this flow chart? Any members of the board further wanting questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, seeing none, let's maybe do a pause, and Nick, we'll go to the public. Again, we hope that there are members of the public that have got questions about this, since again, this certainly strikes to the heart of what a lot of people have weighed in on in past meetings, is a very significant sense of ownership and stewardship in this basin by the citizens in the basin towards the environmental conditions. So members of the public, Nick, you go ahead and unmute, and let's see if we've got any folks that would like to weigh in.
Yep. Let's just go ahead and start. If anybody's calling in on the web, not via telephone, let's just go ahead and start with you to keep this segmented. Any members of the public who are joining us via web? All right, hearing none, seeing none. At this time, if you are calling in on the telephone, you have been unmuted, and if you wish to make a question or comment at this time regarding this item, you have the floor. Okay, hearing none and seeing none.
Okay, well, this concludes this segment of the presentation. We'll move on.
Great. So this first thing that we're going to talk about is identifying the potential GDEs within the basin. So here we have a map, and this map shows the springs, the pink diamonds, open water, blue, the other groundwater dependent wetlands, and then riverine and riparian, which, as you would anticipate, is along the streams and rivers. So to identify these GDEs, we've pulled from a variety of different databases, things like the National Wetland Inventory, the National Hydrography Dataset, CalVeg, that sort of thing. We've also pulled some data from previous studies, like the 2015 Kennedy-Jenks report, and then there were a few other known locations from the project teams that were added. I'd like to point out that under SGMA, we're only required to use the best available data to identify GDEs. And currently, we've already done more than that, doing some, field verification and identification. And we're continuing on to, evaluate more GDEs within the basin, including doing imagery analysis, aerial imagery analysis, and further field verification studies to make sure that, we find and identify all of those GDEs within the basin. And once we have this list of potential GDEs, we then need to identify what or where surface water, these features might be influenced by pumping. So here we have the same map with the GDEs identified, and the colored circles here represent municipal pumping wells, and then the small gray circles represent private wells. So we've drawn some general areas here. In red, you'll see areas where municipal pumping could potentially be impacting GDEs, and the orange circles similarly represent areas where private wells could potentially be impacting GDEs. These circles are just meant to give us a general focus of where we should really focus our efforts when we think about how the GDEs might be influenced by pumping. So another additional study that's been ongoing is to really try to analyze the surface water groundwater interaction throughout the basin. And this can be done through an accretion study, which tells us where and how water enters and leaves the stream during low flow conditions. When we go out and do these studies, we measure both flow and specific conductance or salinity at various points throughout a stream or throughout a watershed on a single day. And we can see how the flow changes from upstream to downstream. So during 2019, we conducted 3 of these measurements along Bean and Zayante Creek and in conjunction with some measurements along the San Lorenzo. We went out in late May, in mid-July, and in late September. And these are the results from the late September measurements. As a reminder, water year 2019 was a wet year. And so we can see in the segments of line that are in dark blue are areas where the stream is gaining, similar to what we talked before, where the groundwater is contributing flow. Areas in pink are considered losing reaches, where water is infiltrating from the stream to the groundwater. And there was one reach along Bean Creek here that was noted to be dry, and we hiked this section of creek in October to map the extent of that dry reach. This reach here along Bean Creek is known to be one of the only real losing reaches within the entire basin and has historically gone dry since the 1960s. Since water year 2019 was a wet year, during drier conditions, we actually believe or know that it goes, those extents go further upstream. In contrast here, lower Bean Creek is known to be one of the largest gaining reaches throughout the entire basin. So I'm going to flip ahead to the next slide here, which shows the same data in a different way. So this is Bean Creek, and here we have upstream near Glenwood, and downstream would be with the confluence of Ziente Creek. So going back to the map, this is upstream, and then coming downstream to the confluence with Ziente. And what you can see here is if there were no groundwater interaction in the stream, then in between all of the measurements and tributaries, we would anticipate this line would be completely horizontal. But that's clearly not what we see. We see areas where flow is losing and becomes dry in that dry reach. And downstream, there's a large increase in flow because this is where groundwater is contributing. If I had plotted the results of May and July, this trend along Bean Creek would look very similar, but the total flow would be higher, sort of as you would anticipate earlier in the season. We just went out a couple weeks ago and did the exact same measurements this July, which will be very interesting for comparison purposes since water year 2020 was a much drier year. And I will pause here for any questions on GDE locations or accretion.
Okay, so we'll open up the floor. Again, this is yet another graph, but it's sort of a different type than you're accustomed to, perhaps, the kind of hydrograph nature. So want to make sure everybody is tracking on the way in which that balance is analyzing these things. So any questions or comments from the board? All right, hearing none and seeing none, we can go ahead and continue then. Chelsea.
Great. So the next step here is to look at the priority species and habitat. So here's some examples of priority species in the basin, as you would anticipate: steelhead trout, coho salmon, lamprey, California red-legged frog, and some endemic flower species. This list was generated from the California Natural Diversity Database with some additional updates from the county biologist. We're going to further update this list when we work with the Surface Water Technical Advisory Group. And I just want to talk briefly about salmon life history, just to sort of get an idea of who or what a beneficial user of the water might be. So we're going to talk about steelhead, and specifically, we're going to talk about juvenile steelhead, so that we can think about how groundwater, and more specifically pumping, may impact salmon habitat. And we're going to focus on the development of juveniles, which occurs from late spring into the fall, and specifically this life stage because this is when the groundwater influences to stream flow will have the greatest impact. So thinking about juvenile rearing habitat, there's 4 main components of the habitat. You have stream flow, food supply, temperature, and then habitat quality, including things like cover and substrate. Thinking about stream flow, that late spring and early summer period is really the time that's the most critical period for growth. And the late summer, early fall is that time when really it's more of survival mode with limited growth. But I think one of the things that's the most important here to recognize is that stream flow actually plays a really large role in some of the other elements of habitat, like food and temperature. So it's very important in terms of making sure that there's enough, that the streams are productive enough to help salmon live in the stream. And then I also wanted to briefly go over the county steelhead monitoring program, which measures the density of juvenile steelhead throughout the San Lorenzo, Soquel, Aptos, and Pajaro watersheds. The light blue circles here represent the young of the year, and the dark blue circles represent the larger, older fish. And these circles represent the density. So on the left here, we have the density map from 2014 to 2015, which was a dry year, compared to the density from 2017 to 2018, which was a wet year. I should also say that the relationship between the type of year and salmon survival is complicated, and there's a number of factors that go into whether or not salmon survive. But we do see that there are higher densities during this wet year, and it suggests that that higher sustained base flow that's occurring during the summer is likely a contributing factor to juvenile survival. And I will also say that this is a really cool data set that's available through the county website, which is listed down here. And I encourage you to look more into it if you have other questions. This is just a brief snapshot. But I will pause here to talk about priority species.
Yeah, so Lou, I'm gonna, not that I'm encouraging you to get back into the queue, but hopefully this is starting to get a bit to some of the questions you were asking earlier, and you all can begin to start seeing where the somewhat squishy nature of things is. We're talking about base flow, and we're talking about the way in which different species rely on base flow and the role that groundwater plays in base flow, even if we're not talking about regulating specifically about the species themselves. I see Lois in the queue, so we'll go to Lois first and see if anybody else wants to get into the queue with any questions or comments. Lois, go ahead, please.
Okay. About the coho and the steelhead. Okay, what I'm hearing is we've got groundwater going into the stream flows, but groundwater is cool. It stays pretty cool, and it goes into the stream flows, is my understanding, and that water being cool is beneficial to the fish. So I would like to know if I'm right on that.
Yeah, Lois, that's a really great point that you make, and you're absolutely right. So during the summer, that surface water really does heat up, and groundwater is able to maintain a much cooler temperature. So the influence that groundwater has on the stream, not only just from a stream flow, standpoint, but also being able to cool that warmer surface water is very important for salmon survival.
All right, thank you, Lois. Other questions or comments at this point in time as we've started moving into some of these example species conundrums that have got to be dealt with? Any other comments or questions? Doug, go ahead, please.
Thanks. Chelsea, I don't know if this is the time, maybe it is, because you've kind of surfaced a bunch of information. I guess I'm curious, given the chart here that we're looking at from the county, but extrapolating from that, which stream should we be thinking about as key habitat for the anadromous fish? I mean, if we were going to point at a handful of streams, I mean, I assume Zyandy and Bean, but I don't know that for a fact. And then with that, I mean, how far up those streams do we end up being concerned? I mean, for example, on Bean Creek, we have this losing reach that dries. Presumably, there's no evidence of habitat upstream of that. Can you help shed some light on that?
Yeah, and I think that's a really great question. I might see if there's someone, I don't know, from the county available, might be a little bit more informed in terms of the actual stream locations that are the highest priority?
Well, let's look to Sierra. Are you with us, or John?
I'm here, and I was actually going to see if Kristen Kittleson has been listening. She's our fisheries biologist, and she's the best suited to answer Doug's question. Are you there, Kristen? She was not expecting to maybe be called on today.
I am here. I'm here.
Hi.
Thanks. Yeah. There is steelhead habitat upstream of the dry reach on Bean Creek. So adult steelhead are able to migrate up past that dry reach in the wintertime and spawn, and there are young that rear upstream of the dry reach. It's just that in the dry reach, any young fish that are there die as the stream dries up.
Okay, Doug, does that help shed any further light, or do you have a follow-on?
That was certainly part of the question. I know I babbled on there for quite a while, but I guess I'm curious about some guidance about which of the creeks, which of the streams we should be thinking about as we think about critical habitat here.
Yeah, this is Kristen again, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about in the technical advisory group is looking at those streams, but most of them are important within the Santa Margarita groundwater basin. Zayante definitely is a priority, and so is Bean Creek, but you also have part of the main stem, which can be very productive. So I'd have to look at the basin again, but definitely Bean and Zayante are very important tributaries.
But I think a key factor then, as Kristen said, is this is one of those questions that I think if I can ask to Nick, we should make note of and make sure that we transition from this discussion, not that it wouldn't otherwise, but just to be absolutely sure when the surface water technical advisory group starts meeting, this is the kind of things that are going to start getting discussed there, Doug. Other questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, seeing none, again, because we're in sort of a module about the species, I will again look to the public. Again, given the importance that species and habitat seems to play in this basin with this level of stewardship, are there any members of the public that would like to pose any questions or make any comments at this time that you would want to make sure that this board hears? So Nick, I'm going to look to you and make sure that, I guess we're checking in first with the folks on the web, and then we'll check to the phones.
Okie doke. If you're joining us via web, now's your time. All right, hearing nothing from anybody joining us online, let's go ahead. And if you're calling in via telephone, if you're a member of the public calling in via telephone and you wish to express a comment at this time regarding this item, go ahead and do so. Okay,
all right.
I'm hearing nothing from the phones.
Right, so hearing none, this concludes this segment of the presentation. Go ahead, Chelsea.
Great. So next we're going to think about how to quantify stream flow depletion and thinking about the impacts to GDEs from groundwater pumping. So under SGWA, we're required to identify the rate or volume of surface water depletion caused by groundwater use that has adverse impacts on beneficial uses of the surface water and may lead to undesirable results. So what this means essentially is we need to quantify the amount of water that would be in the streams if there were no groundwater pumping. So what that difference is. And we're specifically concerned with the potential impact that groundwater pumping has on beneficial users of groundwater, such as, people that get water supplied from water districts or from private wells. And we're also, concerned with the environmental users, the ecological communities, or the species that live in groundwater dependent ecosystems. And we'll pause to see if there's any questions on stream flow depletion.
Any immediate questions from folks? Again, this starts to become a different set of metrics than you're accustomed to on other indicators we've spoken about. Rick, go ahead, please.
we're looking to quantify the amount of water that our groundwater has impact on the surface water streams, but we should also look on the impacts that the groundwater we take out and goes back into the streams from septic systems way up in like the Zion Canyon and probably Bean Creek as well, which should, I think, gives a positive flow to the streams. I don't think we should just look in one direction. And maybe we should save this discussion for the technical group. But I see there's benefit by extracting groundwater, especially in the San Lorenzo Valley where we're all septics, because that does flow a percentage back into the streams.
Yeah, that's a really
statement,
great
question.
Yeah, and it's a really great point. And this basin in particular, I think, that's a very important element that needs to be considered. And I believe that it is being considered within the model, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But that element is certainly, a component of that when we think about what that total amount of stream flow depletion is.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Let's go to Doug and then to Georgina.
Just building on Rick's comment, acknowledging that there is some gain from septic flows as we downstreamers know, it's not an unalloyed good, though. We have to do a lot of work to clean up that river before we can drink the water.
Okay, thank you. Georgina, go ahead, please. Very difficult to hear. Very difficult to hear you, Georgina, just so you know.
Oh, okay. I think Kelsey answered the question well to Rick about the model is the only tool that we have to evaluate the stream flow depletion. I think on another slide she might be talking about that as well. But we do, like she said, we do have the septics in there as well, and it doesn't, obviously septics don't flow directly to the stream, but they do pass through the aquifer and then come out. And so, so we will be able to quantify that, but it's not measured. It's because we can't measure that. And so the model is the only tool we have to do that.
All right, thank you, Georgina. And just Georgina, a heads up, since you'll be presenting shortly, there was something you did mid-statement there that made it a little bit better, but you're still fairly echoey, so you may want to be testing some things out before we come to you for your presentation. Let's go ahead at this point, Chelsea, please.
So just to give a better idea of what we're talking about when we talk say stream flow depletion, we can pretend that we have a stream that's flowing and there's no pumping that's going on near that stream. And the stream flow is 2 CFS. And then we can have the same stream with a well nearby and the well gets turned on. And then we see that the stream flow drops to 1.5 CFS. So the pumping has caused a 0.5 CFS decrease in stream flow. It would be great if it were actually that easy to measure. It's unfortunately very challenging, if not impossible, to figure out what that actual depletion is. The impact of pumping can take many years, if not decades, to result in a response in stream flow. And it's also important to realize that the wells don't actually have to be right next to the stream in order to cause an impact. They can be much further away, and over time will result in a depletion of stream flow. There's a number of other factors that influence stream flow, as we're all aware, aside from just groundwater and pumping, things like rainfall, surface water diversion, surface water management, evapotranspiration. And because of these factors, it's nearly impossible to accurately go out and measure stream flow depletion in a physical sense. So really, as Georgina said, the only way to do this is to use the model. And the updated model that's being calibrated now is going to be critical for actually quantifying what that stream flow depletion is. Looking at some of the previous modeling results, these will be updated with the new model, but I wanted to give you a general sense of how much each aquifer is contributing to groundwater discharge and what those trends have been over time. So the approximate contribution to groundwater discharge in the basin is, of the total amount of groundwater discharge that's happening, how much is each aquifer contributing? And I'm sure some of you have added these all up right now and realized there's only 99% here. And so we'll say that the 1% was lost to rounding. But the biggest thing you'll notice here is that the Santa Margarita is by and large the greatest contributor to groundwater discharge. And it's been relatively consistent since the 1980s when pumping began. The Monterey also has had relatively consistent groundwater discharge, but both the Lompico and the Butano have been declining. And this rate of declining was noted over the period of the model, which I believe was from the 1980s to 2012 or so. But something else to think about here is that, you know, they're contributing a much smaller amount to that total groundwater discharge. So sort of keeping that in mind too when we start to think about what's significant and unreasonable in terms of how much each aquifer is contributing to base flow. And I will pause here for any questions.
Okay, opening the floor again. Let's go to Dale and then Lois. Dale, go ahead, please.
Thanks. So looking at these numbers, am I correct in thinking that we should then be concerned about the amount of pumping in the Santa Margarita, since it's contributing the most to the stream flows? And then the second question on the Lompico and the Butano, where it's currently 12% and 4% contributing but declining, do we know what those percentages were in the past?
To answer your first question, I agree that I think the Santa Margarita is going to be likely the focus of the efforts when we think about pumping, and also thinking about the location of a lot of the GDEs. Many of them are located within the Santa Margarita, so that likely is going to be the most important. The rates of declining I have seen from the previous study, but I think that maybe, George, I don't know if we're ready to talk about the updated model, but I think that using that updated model will have a much better sense of what those rates were previously. But we're really going to need to rely on the new model for that.
Okay, let's move on to Lois, please.
Okay, I hopefully I'm not jumping ahead again, but as you know, SLV, we have a lot of groundwater, and we have a lot of surface water. We take water from the streams. I'm not aware of us drying up the streams by our pumping of groundwater. And you say that it's difficult to measure the stream water, and what I was reading was that you look at the water table where there's depletion or whatever that is, if it's going to affect the streams, that's how you measure it. But how do you go about that? Do you just use wells? Are you going to talk about that some more later on? And if there are no wells nearby, how do you actually test the water, the stream water levels versus the groundwater levels? And it seems like the Santa Margarita, even though there is so much water going to streams from Santa Margarita, the Santa Margarita seems to grab a lot of the rain, the water. It comes into the Santa Margarita basin, and it seems to be, to me, it seems like it's not like the Monterey basin, where the water kind of trickles through the rocks and stuff and goes off who knows where. I know in Lompico, we were in the Monterey part of the basin, and we just really didn't have water. And if we would have been in the Santa Margarita, it would have been a whole different ball game. So I'm not sure I understand where this is going.
I think you bring up some really good points, and I do think that when we get to 2 sections from now, I'm hoping that I'll be able to address your questions about measuring, but briefly, we can measure surface flow, but as you've said, it's very difficult, right, to detect what that influence of groundwater is, measuring that purely from the surface water. So you need to be able to relate those groundwater levels to the surface water levels to figure out what the contribution of groundwater is to streams. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the upcoming sections.
Okay, so you'll be talking about how wells might affect the streams and how you can use wells to measure the impact on streams?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so with that, let's go ahead and continue. Chelsea, please.
So next, we're going to begin to start thinking about the significant and unreasonable statement for the depletion of interconnected surface water. And as previously, I've pulled a couple of examples from some other basins, and I'll read those here. So the first one is from the Mid-County GSP, and it says that significant and unreasonable depletion of surface water due to groundwater extraction in interconnected streams supporting priority species would be undesirable if there is more depletion than experienced since the start of shallow groundwater level monitoring through 2015. And the next one's from the Eastern San Joaquin and Merced GSPs. Significant and unreasonable depletions of interconnected surface water in the Eastern San Joaquin subbasin are depletions that result in reductions in flow or levels of major rivers and streams that are hydrologically connected to the basin, such that the reduced surface water flow or levels have a significant adverse impact on beneficial uses and users of the surface water within the subbasin over the planning and implementation horizon of this GSP. And the third one is from Cayuma Basin. Significant and unreasonable depletions of interconnected surface water are reductions in the viability of agriculture or riparian habitat within the basin over the planning and implementation horizon of this GSP. So we can think about some of the key elements of those statements. And I know that you've worked on a number of these other statements previously. They should be descriptive and not quantitative. And you'll also probably notice there's a few key elements. The first is who or what is impacted. This could be beneficial users or priority species. What kind of impact could be impacts to habitat or impacts to agriculture. Over what time period could be since 2015 or over the planning and implementation of the GSP. And I think we'll pause here to see if there's any feedback or thoughts about elements that you would like to incorporate into the significant and unreasonable statement for this sustainability indicator.
So this is a similar exercise that you all have been through, that Georgina has led us through. So this should not be new to you. So there are, as you have had a chance, hopefully, to look prior to tonight's meeting at the example statements, and you look at the criteria listed here in the bullets, are there any immediate ideas that you think should also be included in a statement of significance and unreasonableness? All right, seeing none, and obviously this is a first night that we're going to be talking about, and we're going to be talking about GDEs and interconnectedness much in the future, so don't feel bad if you don't have anything immediate. In this case, let's go ahead and move straight on, Chelsea.
Hold on. Sorry, Dave. I'm jumping in here. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, better. Yes.
Yeah, we really need to hear from people, because the work that we do coming up that we'll present to you in the next meeting, so the work that we'll start tomorrow, has to be directed by input from you on this, because we don't want to come up with this statement on our own. So if you could dig deep and find something to say to give us some direction on what you'd like to see, what you think is significant and reasonable depletion, that would help us do our work tomorrow.
Okay, let's go to Terry, and then we'll move on to Jack. Terry, go ahead.
I just have a question about the words "over the planning and implementation horizon" of this GSP. Does that mean, yeah, we're just going to look at it over the next 5 years, 20 years? I mean, it feels like the timeline that is on Eastern San Joaquin's, that was the language in theirs, and they have now been sued on that, saying that they weren't serious about making things happen. They were just going to use the 20-year time frame to get things done. Do you have any feel about what those words mean, over the planning and implementation horizon of this GSP?
Yeah, it's Georgina here. What that means is actually the next 50 years. It's strange that planning should be really us doing the GSP, and then the implementation is, if for the next 20 years we have to implement, and then after that, that's when when DWR will start kind of seeing, are you avoiding undesirable results? And you have to do that for another 30 years. So that's the implementation horizon. It's 50 years. And there is someone actually on the phone, Tom Berg from DWR. If he feels that I have answered that incorrectly, he should speak up now, if possible. I see he's not unmuting, so maybe he agrees.
Were life that simple? I think it may be Tom has responded. I can't see that anything was incorrect. Thank you, Tom. I think perhaps let's lead this slide up that you've currently got, Chelsea, so people can be associating themselves with some of the example statements. Let's go to Jack, and as Georgina said, perhaps looking at this slide as some examples, we really do want to try to extract from you anything that we can tonight. So Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, similar question about that Terry raised about the timeline. So I actually like the second one from San Joaquin Subbasin. It's a little wordy, but for me it covers the essentials, and so I'd be comfortable with something like that, with a more of a shorter defined time frame, whether that be 10 years or whatever might be appropriate. But for me, it's covering impacts and factors in an important but still general way. I know I wasn't so crazy. The first one, let's see, which was it? The one Mid-County. I was a little unclear about what they meant on that one, about groundwater level monitoring through 2015. Does that mean from January 1st, 2015, or is it from whenever they started this shallow monitoring?
So Chelsea, any answer to that? And then we'll move on to Lois and then Rosemary.
Well, I'm going to answer because I'm not sure if Chelsea knows the background on that. It's from when they started monitoring through 2015. Yes.
So do you know?
You were right.
And was that just that one year then, January of 15 forward?
No, actually they started monitoring in like 2000. So it was 15 years of data. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And when they say, last question on this, when they say are they saying don't add to that, or are they saying don't duplicate that issue, the concern that already happened, you know? Or are they saying just add, don't make it any worse, or are they saying don't have that much damage done further that was already done?
It was don't make it worse.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm still most comfortable with the second one. Thank you.
Let's go to Lois and then Rosemary.
So I'm wondering, on these other examples, are these areas where they're have overpumped and have major problems? Because we aren't like that. So that's my question, because are these already submitted to the state because they had to report by January of this year? And
yeah,
okay, so would there be something better that might represent where we are in the world than
yeah,
these
I think that's a good point that you make.
Yeah. So so Mid-County was submitted in January because of seawater intrusion, not because of depletions of surface water from pumping. You know, I probably the similar order to what we're going to see in this basin. The other basins I'm not as familiar with, but no one really else in the state has very much data to do these calculations that you were talking about already, Director Henry, about measuring in the well and looking at the depletions. People generally have not got that much information on it. Mid-County does probably have some of the best data in the state, and it still wasn't enough for us to do a full evaluation. But none of these other GSPs have got a strong understanding of the depletions, and there is nothing that I know of where they've said, you know, there is significant unreasonable conditions occurring because groundwater levels are low and that's affecting stream flow. People don't have that information yet at their fingertips, so they are having to, in the implementation of the GSP, they are filling those data gaps with stream gauges, with shallow wells, trying to understand this relationship much better, as we will be doing in this basin. So none of these that you see before you, these statements, are because it's a high priority basin because of stream flow depletion. It's usually it's something else.
Okay, so our modeling is going to look at more areas involving groundwater and stream flow?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what we have to use, you know, in lieu of measured data. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, in the queue is Rosemary, then Doug, then Chris, and then Lou. I'm going to do a point of order right now, not to truncate any of the questions because it's critical. We do get that feedback from you all, so we're thrilled that you're jumping in. I just want to prepare everybody, and Georgina and I have already been talking back and forth. We're about a little bit over an hour away from ending the meeting. We were looking to end section 4 of the agenda at around 8:15 to allow for the last final 15 minutes. Georgina is already thinking about and preparing to truncate her presentation. It's very unlikely that we're going to be able to get all the way through her presentation. So I just want everybody to be clear that that's how we're proceeding here. And we definitely need to get through this one since we're kicking it off tonight. With that, let's go to Rosemary and then Doug.
Hi there. I just want to make the point that the statement about priority species and interconnected streams that supporting priority species from the Mid-County Basin, I think is a critically important element to include in a statement for this basin. The San Lorenzo is one of the largest coho recovery streams in the ESU, that is the evolutionarily significant unit that's south of the San Francisco Bay. The city is making major investments in in-stream flows to help protect the system from our diversions and our extractions, which mostly happen lower down in the basin. But I think that what I would hope we would have in this basin would be a commitment to partnering to really make the upper part of the basin function well for the support of the recovery of steelhead and coho salmon. So that's just my plea.
Thank you. Let's go to Doug and then Chris and then Lou. Oh,
Withdrawn.
Doug.
Rosemary stole my thunder.
Darn her. Okay, Chris, we'll go to you and then Lou.
Yeah, same here, basically.
Okay, Lou.
Yeah, I just want to agree with Jack. I think that the statement by the Eastern San Joaquin and Merced covers the most important aspects of significant and unreasonable at looking at those three. And I just think that I like the wording, and it seems to be dead on. So I agree with Jack.
Thank you. Dale, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I prefer the first two, not the third. I like bits from the first one from Mid-County, mainly the first portion of it, and then also the second one. But it'd be nice if it wasn't as wordy, like Jack said, kind of concise and kind of more to the point. So I'm hoping that we can maybe also submit our ideas in email form like we've done, just so we can maybe put some things down on paper and submit them.
Yeah, Georgina, I know you're wanting people to start giving you the feedback tonight, but we have done that before. So are you
Yeah.
amenable to that? Okay.
No,
so
that's good.
So when would we want to set a deadline for getting any written thoughts sent to Nick, which he would then compile and provide to you and to Chelsea?
Correct. It's usually, what, 2 weeks or so from after today's meeting?
It depends if we have 5 weeks or 4 weeks between the meetings. If it's 4 weeks, we have to work backwards, and I would say week to 10 days max in order to give you enough time to work it in.
Mm-hmm.
So how about a week from tomorrow? Can folks try to do that? So a week from tomorrow, so the next Friday, try to get your feedback in, and we would, as we've done with the past, send that into the attention of Nick and Perrette, and then Nick will compile it and provide it to the technical team. Anybody opposed to that time frame?
That works, and then Nick can also send out a reminder for everybody on Monday with a date, so it's
right.
Exactly what's expected and by what time.
Great. Okay,
Understood.
very good. Chelsea, let's move ahead, please, then to, I think, 2 slides ahead, probably.
So next, we're going to talk about the approach for minimum thresholds and measurable objectives. As we've talked about, one of the issues here with quantifying stream flow depletion is that most of the base flow data are modeled, they're not measured, and that there's a number of contributing factors to stream flow, things like precipitation, temperature, evapotranspiration, stream diversions, making it very difficult to accurately measure and quantify that stream flow depletion. So this shows the location of where our existing and proposed stream gauges are for the basin. We're adding 2 new gauges this summer, one on the San Lorenzo above Love Creek and one on Bean Creek near Mackenzie Creek, this being the dry reach in Bean Creek that we discussed earlier. But I think one of the issues here is that many of these gauges have not been in for a particularly long period in time. So we don't necessarily have the long period of record that we would like to have for making these assessments, in addition to the fact that stream flow alone is not going to be a very viable approach to quantifying depletion and coming up with what those minimum thresholds should be. So Sigma allows the use of a proxy, and in this case, we'd be talking about groundwater level as a proxy. And the idea here is that
Lois, this is where we're getting back to your question, just so you know.
So we can compare well data that's nearby streams or a GDE, and if the groundwater level is above or near even, but let's say it's above where that GDE is, then the flow of water is contributing to that stream. And there's been a methodology and approach that's been developed in many other basins. In fact, all of the basins that I'm aware of have used groundwater level as a proxy for establishing the minimum thresholds, because using in-stream flow alone is so difficult. We can then set the minimum threshold of groundwater that's nearby and evaluate how those changes in groundwater, might be impacting in-stream flows. I do also want to point out that, we do have limited data here, and so those 5-year annual reports are going to be really important for reevaluating and refining the thresholds because we don't have a very robust data set to go along. And it's also one of the reasons that we're really going to be relying on the model to help answer some of these questions, as well as having a more enhanced monitoring system to help us continue to refine. As part of this, we also do need to show a correlation between the groundwater elevations and the interconnected stream flow in order to be able to use this method. So I'll pause here because I think I want to make sure that we've answered Lois's questions, and others might have some questions as well about this process.
So I'd like to go first to Lois, as I committed to earlier. So Lois, is this getting to responding to your question, or do we need to dive in a little more deeply? So Lois, maybe let's go to you first.
I kind of, I'm wondering if this is all that the groundwater levels are gonna all be measured by wells. I mean, what if there's not a well anywhere for several miles? I just don't quite understand how you're going to measure the surface water by measuring the groundwater.
Great. So part of it has to be based on the existing monitoring well network, because that's all that we currently have. We do also have, and I'll show you in the next slide here, but we do have proposed monitoring wells as well to help better answer those questions as we, continue to refine. And then those wells can be located near stream gauges, and we can really work to identify and see that connection between the two as we move forward.
So, but would it be a shallow well, or would it be a little tiny kind of a well, which sounds crazy? What kind of wells would they be? And I guess as Dave knows, I always come back to money, and I'm looking at SLV, and we've got all these streams, and we're spread over a huge area. Who's paying for all this?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question and an important concern. So we've selected some locations for shallow wells for monitoring, and we pick the best, most representative location that we can, while also considering the fact that there is a financial implication that needs to be taken into account, that we can't just monitor everything and put tons of wells in. So we make the best decisions we can and try and target very specific locations that we'd like to measure.
Okay. Well, thank you for your answers. And I'm just trying to get my head around all of this. And of course, my big concern is SLV, and we have so many streams and a lot of surface water. Surface water that can go from SLV to Scotts Valley through interties. I mean, we can be of benefit to other water districts who need some help. But I'm concerned about cost. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the queue is Georgina and Doug, but before we do that, I think maybe this might be a good moment to perhaps go to Rick as the GM of SLV, or Perrette as the appointed individual for this basin or for this agency. Because when we talk about who's going to pay for all this, that is something that's going to certainly be covered in the coming months on the project and management actions, including enhanced monitoring networks. But it is a very telling question right here and in the moment. So Rick, I don't know, do you have anything that you want to weigh in on regarding those kind of cost implications, or Perrette?
Well, just real quick, I mean, definitely Lois's concerns are SLV's concerns. I just don't think we're there yet. We've had one meeting with Georgina on the test wells, or on the monitoring wells, and we've kind of came up with a plan on who was going to maintain the monitoring wells, and we're moving along on that. We're just getting into the surface water. I think as we get into the tech group, I think a lot more of this will come out. I mean, this is our first look, and the board's first look at this tonight on surface water. So I think it might be just a little bit premature, but they are valid concerns.
Okay, thank you. Perrette, anything else you would like to add to from the agency perspective? Otherwise, we'll go on.
Yes, there's two pieces to that. One is installation of the new monitoring network, and the other one is operation and maintenance. Fortunately for the installation piece, we do have very significant help from state in terms of the grant. The second grant included about $700,000, and the $700,000 that goes towards that effort. But it's still to be seen who, and I would say there's three parties. San Lorenzo County and Scotts Valley Water District will have to bear the cost going forward for the next 50 years of making sure those tools get used. And I agree with Rick that it's still to be determined what that cost is and how it's going to be divvied up.
All right, let's go to Georgina and then Doug. And Georgina, go ahead.
Yeah, I can respond to the question about cost a little bit too. Is that it's possible that we would have monitoring wells in every perfect location. DWR understands that. They know that no one's going to put in hundreds of monitoring wells, even if they were tiny, shallow ones, because that's a big cost, and to go and monitor them and maintain them is just that's just out of the realm. And so we have a wonderful tool available, soon to be available, and that is a groundwater model, and that's what you use to interpret between those areas where you don't have measurements. So the model will tell you what your groundwater levels are doing at these locations. Are groundwater levels higher than the stream? And that's actually how we work out where there's connections, because, you know, Balance hasn't gone to every stream and done accretion runs. We also have to use the model to determine where it's disconnected or connected. So, and that model will be ongoing. Yes, they will have to be updates every 5 years or so of that model to provide us the answers. But it's not just monitoring wells that we'll be relying on.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Doug, please.
Well, Georgina actually answered my question. Thanks.
And you're just getting shut down left and right and center tonight, aren't you, Doug?
Making your meeting go fast.
All right, I do want to do a process check. We're about 20 minutes out from when we need to shut this presentation down. So let's go ahead and continue. Chelsea, please. Or actually, Rick, did you have something else you wanted to add? I'm noticing your name in there in the queue.
Well, I know we're getting short on time, but when we talked with Georgina and we talked about monitoring wells, we're trying to use as many existing wells that are already out, which there are quite a few of existing wells in the basin, and that'll cut costs considerably as well. So we're still developing information on what's going to be required to do this monitoring.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Chelsea, let's proceed.
So this is a map that shows all of the existing surface water gauges, along with where the production wells are in yellow, the existing monitoring well network, and some of those proposed shallow monitoring wells, which are the white circles with the black dot in the center. And there are a number of wells that can, as Rick said, be used for this monitoring network. And then there's a few additional locations that will aid in helping us get a better understanding of what's where the groundwater levels are within the basin as we use this as a proxy. And then I just wanted to show an example. So when we talk about, the groundwater levels, here we have the hydrographs that you've seen from a monitoring well. And then we can look at the nearby stream bed elevation. And you can see that the groundwater levels are much higher than the stream bed elevation. And so we can use this data at various locations where we have existing data to help us set what those minimum thresholds might be for looking at how these groundwater levels are influencing in-stream flows. And then I can take any questions.
Yeah, go ahead. So we'll take any questions that are here. It wouldn't be a Santa Margarita presentation without something looking like hydrographs. So, any comments or questions on this one? Okay, let's proceed.
And then just to wrap up here, we can do a quick status update and look at the next steps.
Oh, wait, hold on, Chelsea. Sorry, could you go back? I just wanted to point out something that's quite important, and because I'm the one who's led you through the chronic lowering of groundwater levels, I think it's important to notice that that hydrograph that you see there just south of Bean Creek, Chelsea's pointing at it. You see where it is there. It's kind of between where, Passion Tempo and where Scotts Valley Water District pumps. It's kind of north of the quarry, I guess, there. And groundwater levels this is a Santa Margarita well, have been fairly constant. So you see through the dry period from 90 to 95, a lot of you've seen that chronic lowering of groundwater levels that happened in both the Santa Margarita and the Lompico. It did not happen at this well that's close to Bean Creek. So that just is showing you, yes, you've had these declines south of this, but there has been enough recharge that it's kept the groundwater levels up higher. And so when we do the model, we'll be able to see what that percentage reduction of base flow and this reach is. How has it declined over time? But we already know it from the table that Chelsea shared with you that the Santa Margarita, it's been fairly, there's no been downward trend of base flow over time. So this is, this is the type of information that we'll be using to analyze those conditions, both looking at climatic periods and how much pumping was happening. Okay, had my word.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So we've identified the potential GDEs using existing databases and other known GDEs. We're going to continue to do the identification and verification. We've generally identified the areas where the GDEs may be influenced by pumping from both water districts and from private wells. And though these areas will be our primary area of focus for evaluating GDEs and for setting minimum thresholds and measurable objectives. We're going to be working with the Surface Water Technical Advisory Group to refine the priority species list. And we're going to be using the model to quantify stream flow depletion. The board is going to work on coming up with ideas for developing the significant and unreasonable statement for this indicator, and we will continue to refine that. And finally, we're going to use groundwater level as a proxy for helping to set minimum thresholds and measure objectives. And this is something that will be further discussed with the Surface Water Technical Advisory Group as well. And we'll be diving more into this in upcoming meetings. That is all that I have. So are there any final questions on this?
All right, checking with the board. Any final questions? Hearing none, let's go ahead and check in with the public before we end this segment. Nick, go ahead and check in first online and then by phone.
Yeah, I see Director Ferris has a comment.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lou, please. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We've talked a lot tonight about modeling. When do we think we're going to have the modeling complete, and when will the data be available to the board to review?
The next board meeting is when I'm hoping to provide you those results. The model will be done early next month, and then by the next meeting, a few weeks later, I will be able to present those results.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lou. Let's go to check in one last time for this segment with the public. Any public members online? All right, seeing none and hearing none, we'll check in on the phones, Nick.
Okay, if you are calling in as a member of the public and wish to make a comment or have a question on this item at this time, you have been unmuted. If you're calling in via phone, the floor is yours.
Okay, hearing none and moving things along, we're going to go ahead. This concludes this segment of the presentation. We are now going to move on. We have about 15 minutes left before we need to end section 4. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Georgina as she starts pulling up her presentation. She and I have been communicating via chat, and I recognize that Georgina is going to significantly truncate her presentation, and we will have to then return to it at the next board meeting in a month.
Okay. Let me see. I have a few things to. Right. So I was going to talk about 2 topics, and I'm actually going to flip them because I think the second one, which is talking about the statement of significant unreasonable chronic lowering of groundwater levels, need some input on that. and I'm going to skip straight ahead to that because we need to consider GDEs. If you remember the last two meetings, we actually have been talking about it. And I have said, well, the statement is not completed yet. Sorry, I'm just jumping ahead here. And we need to add a sentence or change something in it so that we can take into account the non-human beneficial users of the basin when it comes to groundwater levels. So what you see before you here is the same as what was presented at the last meeting. We got no comments on this. The board pretty much is going with this. And if we're talking about materially impairing groundwater supply or causing undue financial burden, none of this is related to GDEs. So we need to add something to the statement to reflect these GDEs. And so, let me see, I need to close something. You could add a sentence, something like, I'm not sure how the wording would go, but probably a sentence that says the chronic lowering of groundwater levels that impairs the ability for environmental users and uses to be sustained. And what that's talking about here is it's a little tricky because when we talk about GDEs, people just think, oh, it's related to surface water and only surface water indicator. It's not. So there are the terrestrial GDEs and there are aquatic GDEs. The aquatic GDEs are influenced by depletions of interconnected surface water. The terrestrial GDEs are influenced by groundwater levels. So if there are shallow groundwater levels, they are supporting these, usually it's vegetation that is some distance that is away from surface water or open water or streams or springs or things like that. They're going to be something else. And Chelsea, could you jump in and give us an example of vegetation in the basin that are terrestrial GDEs? Probably actually the open water, that's classed as surface water. So are there any that are not related to actual surface water, but there are plant communities that rely on shallow groundwater?
There might be things like oaks potentially, and maybe even willows that might get included also in the surface water, because those tend to be near riparian areas. But if you had shallow groundwater, that could also be a type of vegetation.
Okay, so that's what we're looking at. And again, so my example would be, and actually it's not my example, Sierra and Chelsea and I got together and thought, what could we add to the statement? And so it's not written down, so I'm going to say it again slowly. Chronic lowering of groundwater levels that impairs the ability for environmental uses and uses to be sustained.
Georgina, I'd like to draw your attention, if you draw attention to the chat box, and Doug has weighed in with a suggestion of his own that Chris and Eden have weighed in on as well. So I do think you may want to take a look at that as well.
It does have the virtue of concision.
Georgina, could you repeat that for the sake of those people that are on the phone, possibly?
Right. So I'm trying to figure out, so a suggestion has been made to say impair groundwater supply. So we talk about groundwater supply, and then say or cause undue burden. Sorry. Impair,
it's
yeah,
inserting
Doug, go ahead.
clause or GDEs into the text as follows. Currently reads, blah, blah, if lowered levels materially impair groundwater supply or cause undue financial burden, I would insert after impair groundwater supply or GDEs, comma, or cause undue financial burden, so that that materially impair language would apply to groundwater supply or GDEs.
Yeah, that's great because the word impair was in there already. So you're just piggybacking onto that. So I've made that change live. So is that what you're looking at?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, does that do what you needed then to do as an initial suggestion, Georgina, or was there something more that you want to try to work on here with the group?
No, that's nice and simple. I like it. And I noticed that Nick has said we need to, so people have supported this in the chat. It would be better if you could verbally do it. I know you're trying to help us speed the meeting up, but it's important that it's in the record.
Well, let's get some feedback. Or is anybody opposed to, or does anybody have a further recommendation to modify this? Ruth, go ahead, please.
I think we might say viability of the GDEs.
Okay. Let's go. Nick, are you going to give a process comment, and then we'll go to Dale?
This is kind of more of a point of order here. The reason why we are asking folks to just write down question or comment in the chat and the chat alone there is the fact that the chat feature is not visible to everybody. And so just as sort of a transparency thing, if we could avoid basically really limit the use of that for communication, just because not everybody in this meeting can read what's on there. So that's kind of more why we're asking to go through the process of using it as a queue instead of an actual mode of communication.
Okay, thank you. So let's go to Dale and then Chris Perry.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I just want to say I'll support the modification as Doug has suggested.
Thank you. Chris?
I also support that modification, and just as a process sidebar, I think it's a very efficient use because Dave reads these and then can read them to everyone. So we don't have to hear from me, Eden, and Doug. So I think it's not a sidebar conversation. It's an efficient use of our time. As long as Dave reads them out loud as you have been doing.
Okay, point noted. All right, are there any other comments that folks would like to make on this modified suggestion? I note that Ruth, again for the record, Ruth had indicated an interest in introducing the concept of viability of the GDEs. So let's make sure, Georgina, that we've got that as a note for you to do some further work on, if not immediately making the change. Any other comments that folks would like to make? Okay, we are at just about 10 after 8. Georgina, is there anything else that you want to try to cover for another 5 minutes until we have to go ahead and end out, or should we hand it back at this point to Chairman Perry? And we'll obviously have to make plans to return back to your presentation next month.
Yeah, I think it would take longer than 5 minutes. So I think it's unfair to rush through it or just to do part of it because I'd have to redo it again. So let's just hold off.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to go ahead and then close out section 4 by thanking all of our presenters, Jennifer and Bill and Chelsea and Georgina, as always, and of course you, the board, of being so actively engaged. Thank you very much. With that, we are going to hand it back over to Chairman Perry to close out the rest of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Dave. So we go on to staff reports. We have financial report for the period from April 1st to June 30th. Are there any questions on the staff report or any clarifications from staff? No?
I can, this is Pirat. I can just make a very quick comment on, it is from Stephanie Hill. She wanted to make sure that you understand this is very preliminary. There's going to be a lot of adjustments that always occur at the end of fiscal year, at the end of any period, but more so at the end of the fiscal year, and June 30th is end of the fiscal year for this agency. So those numbers are what she had at this point when she had to submit it, but there is a final one that is going to be routed to the board when it gets done.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on the financial report from any of the board members? Is there anything from the public? Nick, can you open it up just to?
Absolutely. If you are joining us via web and you are a member of the public who wishes to comment on this, this is your time. And likewise, if you are a member of the public calling in via telephone, you have been unmuted and the floor is yours. Okay, hearing none and seeing none.
Well, I thought caller 6 was going to give us something. I was excited. But okay, so then move on to the quarterly communications report from Bill Maxfield. It's there for everyone to read. Bill, do you want to add anything to that?
I am unmuted. No, I think that it covers it pretty solidly, but I'm happy to take it.
Okay. All right, any questions for Bill from the board? Okay, seeing none. Any questions from the public for Bill? It is our outreach.
And likewise, again, if you are calling in via telephone and you are a member of the public, you have the floor. Okay, hearing none and seeing none.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bill. Pierrette, contract updates.
Thank you. So this is something that comes to the board as an information item. Any contracts that are under 50,000, over 15,000 and up is approved by the board. Under that threshold is approved administratively, and the board gets notified when such contracts go into effect. So we have two ongoing agreements, one with the legal counsel and the other one with our communications consultant, Miller Maxfield. They are on annual cycle, so every year they get extended. That's written into the contract. So it's amendment every year, authorizing them to continue the work for another year. So those are the two contracts. Legal counsel, 30,000 for the upcoming year, or for the year that we are currently in. And for Miller Maxfield, prior year was 35. It's a slight increase this coming year because there's additional scope of work that we need to undertake. It is in relation to the website, and the website needs some overhaul, maybe even all the way to picking a different platform to make it easier to administer for the staff. And not all of the additional 5,000 will be direct payment to Miller Maxfield. There will be a sub-consultant that works and is more of a in the weeds with the website building, and it's a pass-through to that sub-consultant too. So that's all I had to report. Any questions?
Okay. I guess we should open it up technically to the public, see if anyone has comment on the contract updates.
Yeah, it looks like Director Ferris, if you have a comment.
I actually have a legal question I'd like to pose to Terry. From time to time, I've asked our legal counsel at SLVWD questions in regards to issues that may relate to both the SLVWD and SMGWA. And it occurs to me that I probably should be going through you first, if it's primarily a SMGWA issue. Would you rather I contact you first and then Gina, or do you mind if I continue to talk to her about those issues?
If it is the groundwater agency issue, all those issues should go to Perrette or your general manager, and then they'll filter it out and try to figure out the most efficient use of my time. Since I'm on an hourly basis, we don't want to have all the directors contact me directly, and they can answer several of the questions even without involving me.
Okay, just to be clear, these are more questions than issues, and a lot of them are just simple legal questions. But if you'd rather I start with Perrette or
Rick
or whoever, that's fine. I just wanted,
yeah.
It struck me that maybe I should be letting you know I am talking to Gina, number one, and number two, give you a chance, or give Perrette a chance to address the question first.
Rick, if you don't mind, I would suggest that that's a good approach, and it's nothing personal against you, Lou, but we do have 11 plus 7 board members, and I just want to be mindful that if we allow one director directly to contact the legal counsel, they all should have that right, and be mindful of the money side of it. So if you don't mind, start with me or Rick, and we'll put you in touch with Terry.
Right. And I prefer that, most of all Lou's questions have to do with Brown Act or procedures, and I would prefer that he would go through our legal counsel first, and she could refer back to you, Perrette, or to the JPA's legal counsel.
That works for me.
And I work very closely with Gina whenever called upon too, so I'm happy to work with her on any issues if needed.
Okay, one of the reasons I bring it up is that I'm sure other directors have had the same issue. If it's something that deals with both boards, it's kind of a toss-up as to where to go first. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up. I'm not trying to make an issue out of this.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage you to work with Rick and myself, and that's the same applies to all of the directors, because we are your free resource, and then we can hopefully put you in touch with the most appropriate expert if we're not able to help you ourselves.
Understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. No, okay.
A little legal update.
Now we have our legal counsel report. Terry, do you have any update?
I do have an update.
Well, hold on. We still need to check for public comment here. We never did that for the contract update. So if you are a member of the public attending via the web app, you have the floor. And likewise, if you are a member of the public who is calling in via telephone and you have a comment you want to make on this item, you have been unmuted and the floor is yours. Okay, hearing none and seeing none. Director Perry, back to you.
Okay, Terry, give us your update.
Thank you. Last week, I attended a law seminar on groundwater. Sierra Ryan presented, and she did a great job, and there were 2 full days of wonderful panels. All the talk is about the GSPs that were filed within the last 6 months, and of course, the follow-up litigation that's already being filed to challenge the GSPs. There was a lawsuit filed on March 16, 2020 in Stanislaus County, And that was filed by the plaintiff, California Sports Fishing Protection Alliance. And it was to challenge the GSP submitted by the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Agency. That's a pretty complicated basin, and the suit lists 25 separate defendants, including all the groundwater sustainability agencies in the basin, the Oakdale Irrigation District, Stanislaus County, the cities of Stockton, Lodi, Manteca, Escalon, and all of those various agencies were bound or parties to what's called a coordination agreement. And the Sports Fishing Alliance alleged that in adopting the GSP, all of those agencies failed to follow the requirements of the Groundwater Management Act. They said that the GSP does not achieve sustainable groundwater management and is not likely to achieve the sustainable goal established by the GSP within 20 years. They said their assumptions and their findings are not supported by best available science. They said the interests of the beneficial users were never adequately considered. The GSP did not demonstrate that the proposed projects were feasible. The defendants, all those agencies, did not adequately respond to comments and did not adequately engage the public, as we're learning that we have to do. And for anybody who knows anything about that neck of the woods in California, that lawsuit comes as no surprise because there's a ton of nut orchards in the eastern foothills, and the drawdown of water is beyond any capacity for restoration. And so the real answer to that particular area is the necessary fallowing of hundreds of thousands of acres to really make meaningful sustainability. But the plaintiff believes that there's so many agencies and so many conflicts of interest that the GSP was not seriously considering anything. They were just kind of kicking the can, and they used a 20-year window to achieve sustainability. And that's why I picked up on the words over the planning and implementation horizon of the GSP. The allegation in the complaint, and I don't know if it's true or not, is that there's no sense of urgency. They're using that timeline of 20 or 50 years, as Georgina said, to just not really have a measuring stick. So now it's in Superior Court, and COVID's going on. Cases are very slow to be heard. Probably there'll be a decision by the Superior Court within the next year or two, and then there'll be an appeal to the Court of Appeal, and we will not know answers to these questions probably for 4 or 5 years would be my guess at best. So what we discussed tonight is really right in line with this lawsuit, because these fishery guys, the California Sports Fishing Protection Alliance, wants more protection to the surface water, and they think the groundwater depletion is just out of control. So that's my report.
Okay, thank you, Terry. All right, that takes us to, I lost my screen. Bam, okay. Legal counsel update, and then we think your director's report is next. Any reports?
I have a report, Chair.
Okay.
This is Jack Dillis. I attended the Groundwater Sustainability Summit remotely, and we heard from Perrette, Dave, Georgina, and Sierra, who were presenting or moderating. A lot of good information. I'll just rip off just a few things I heard about. The state has an intervention process. If we don't address the issues that they've raised, they'll still work with us to fix it. We heard the future will require us to change and adapt. I think we've heard that too. Challenges included things, this is statewide from other GSPs that have gone through the process and produced reports. Plans the budget overruns, data gaps, and data quality issues. I think we've heard a bit about that. We need to deal with how to allocate water to different types of users, although we don't have the agricultural component, so that may be not as big an issue here. How to allocate water to different types of users. Continue to be collaborative. Don't go back to your silos. I like that advice. There's a focus on, you should be focused on users most impacted. For instance, they said well owners in some areas are the most impacted. So you want to focus on who's being impacted the most. A policy question we may have asked already, but do you protect all wells? If there's an issue, how far do you go to protect everybody? Consider the costs and benefits of your actions, both cost effectiveness, but also equity. Who's paying the bills? Consider costs and benefits of actions. Let's see, costs change over time. You may think you know the costs or estimating, but they could change quite a bit. And you should compare the cost of acquisition, management actions versus managing demand. So, is it more efficient to manage the demand down or to build a lot of infrastructure? And it's important to protect recharge sites from development. So that's what I gleaned.
All right, very good. Anyone else? I did that same Jack, and it was very good. Exhausting, but good. Okay, board compliance. I think someone's coming up on a compliance date, if I'm not mistaken.
This foggy weather makes perfect opportunity for FPPC training.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. Okay, and let me see here. There we go. Okay, future items, everyone can see that. And there's no informational items. And the events calendar, Aqua is coming up. I'm going to attend that. I would recommend it, although the virtual event could be very challenging, but I'm going to give it a swing. Is there anything else? Would anyone make a motion on number 10?
Real quick,
someone
maybe just make one last sweep for public comment.
Yeah.
All right, if you're a member of the public calling in online, or if you're a member of the public who is calling in via telephone, if you're a member of the public at all, you have the floor if you want to make any comment. Anything we just covered. Hearing none and seeing none.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Okay, is there anyone who'd like to make a motion on number 10?
Director Cassidy moves to adjourn.
Director Stiles, second.
Okay, and I'm going to assume all those in favor are aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Or bye.
Okay, I see thumbs up. I don't. Aye. Okay, thank you, everybody. That was a lot of meeting, and everyone did great. And presenters, thank you, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Don't forget to get your comments in on the question in the question.
We'll remind everybody.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. I'll see you soon. Take care. Be healthy.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you.